I hope we're all going to be proven wrong because I'm in this camp that a Trump presidency is going to be even worse for the people of Gaza and for peace in the Middle East.
Thank you.
Folks, credit for this, Mr. President, you or Trump?
Is that a joke? Oh, thank you.
I would love to have to eat crow and be wrong on that.
Thank you. I'm sure you're clapping because I finally showed up. Is that a joke? Is that a joke? Is that a joke?
Issa. Okay. Issa? Yes. Issa Galloway.
Issa Galloway defines the mission.
Kind of a show that will put people on the edge of their seat.
Because it leads to the future with a more sophisticated approach.
Guys, welcome back to the show. It is a monumentous day, potentially, and this is my first show of the new year. I've been working on a lot of projects, but I had to do this as quickly as I could, get out to you guys about the news. I know you've already heard there's a potential end to the genocide in the works, a supposed ceasefire deal. And, I found out about it, and then minutes later, one of my daughters calls me on her cell phone in tears, literally tears of joy, thinking that the genocide and the ethnic cleansing will come to an end. And it was such a moral crisis for me because I have such a mix of feelings. Like, how do I respond to my daughter's hope? And do I trust my own hope in that this horrible situation actually ends, that hostages, both sides, can return to their families, that the slaughter of women and children and Palestinians can stop. As a person of faith, I want to stick to the side of optimism. And then as a father, I'm trying to how do I talk to my children and not kind of spoil their view of the world, but still give them a dose of reality. And then under all of that, this just bubbling kind of anger and want for justice, because from all the reporting, this is the exact same deal that was available, almost to the T, the framework that was available back in May last year. And for anyone who's been following this, you would know that there's been ceasefire talks after ceasefire talks, and over and over and over again, a deal was almost reached, and then either Ben-Gvir or Netanyahu or someone on that side puts a poison pill, changes terms, and keeps the killing going. Because, it is an ethnic cleansing and a genocide up until this point. And then even more anger because of the arrogance of our president, our outgoing president. This, to me, just takes the cake. And I've got to switch over and show you guys a video that I think is incredibly important and demonstrates that arrogance. Let's take a look.
Thank you.
Folks, credit for this, Mr. President, you or Trump?
Is that a joke? Oh, thank you.
Look, guys, I almost every time I see that, I throw up a little bit in my mouth, and it just sparks so much frustration. Not only frustration with the administration, but also frustration with the spin that most of our media are putting on this. And it's just hard to really cover it. And because of that, it's because of wanting justice, because of wanting accountability. And I do have to kind of take accountability on my own here with this idea of if it is time for me to eat some crow. Because on the very first video I did on this channel, I was talking about the Muslim American vote. And I said I would happily be wrong if Trump could bring peace to the Middle East. Now, personally, I feel like the jury's still out. I really think that we don't know what's going to happen. We have embers of hope. I'm hoping it turns into just all in out hope that we can really start to celebrate. and then transition into how to mourn, and then transition how to support the people of Palestine. But I wanted to turn to a report that I think shows why we should be still cautious. So with that, let's get into another video that I think will help us be grounded as we move forward.
I'm told we have Jeremy Scahill, your colleague at Dropsite, on the line here to help us break down the huge news about the ceasefire negotiations.
Let's bring Jeremy in. Jeremy, how you doing?
All right, pins and needles, hoping that this goes through.
Yeah, so let's start back in May to bring people up to speed here. So May of 2024, that was maybe the first time since the November 2023 exchange of prisoners between Israel and Hamas, where there was that 1 week ceasefire. What happens in May, and what has kind of changed since then that got us to this place?
Well, in May, Joe Biden comes out publicly and says that he's reached what he called a monumental point in the ceasefire negotiation, and that he has gotten assurances from Israel that they'll move forward with a deal. And the basic outlines of it are almost identical to what is now being negotiated. That's the first thing that should just be put on the table. They move forward, then they get the United Nations Security Council to officially endorse this, what they called the Biden framework. But actually, many of the tenets of it came from this sort of backdoor discussions between Antony Blinken, Brett McGurk, Bill Burns, the director of the CIA, and the Israelis, to make sure that when Biden goes out and says, hey, this thing is monumental, that it wasn't going to blow up in the White House's face. Well, lo and behold, then Hamas is presented with these terms. There's the back and forth that always happens in these, which is at the technical level. So when you hear people saying, oh, Israel accepted this or Hamas accepted this, what they're talking about usually is they've accepted the broad framework. And then where the real, sort of problems start to occur is when you start talking about technical details. For instance, as of this morning, there was still back and forth going on in Doha over a number of technical issues. The Israelis didn't provide maps to the Palestinian side showing where their forces would be withdrawn from and where they would be repositioned. And the Palestinians are concerned that if they leave any vagueness, the Israelis are going to exploit it. So I just give that as one example. So you have technical issues, and all indications are that these issues right now are being resolved. But going back to over the summer, they then get to that phase of it where you normally would be discussing implementation. And then the Israelis start to put in what Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad negotiators said totally new terms that had to do with the Israelis wanting to remain in Rafah, to keep control of the Philadelphia corridor, to keep control of the Netzarim corridor. So
this is why I don't even want to trust my sense of hope here, because there's so many things that can fall apart. And it's so important that we go into this clear-eyed and that we don't stop advocating for Gaza, for Palestine, for justice, regardless of what happens in the next couple of days, and especially what happens on Monday and after Trump takes office.
Hamas is saying, well, wait a minute. We agreed to what Biden said was a monumental framework that the United Nations endorsed. We now need more time. And then they start the narrative, oh, Hamas refuses to accept the deal. Well, then what happens is you have this back and forth where the Americans come back to the Arab mediators who say to Hamas, listen, would you accept this phrasing in the deal that the Americans have said Israel will accept if you guys do? Hamas then deliberates on it, and then on July 2nd, Hamas officially informs the mediators from Qatar and Egypt, yes, we will accept the American amended ceasefire proposal. The Americans then go back to Israel, and Netanyahu says, no, the circumstances have changed. And then what happens is you have this, string of assassinations where Israel assassinates Ismail Haniyeh, the top negotiator for Hamas, and they do it in Tehran at a guest house that's controlled by the most elite military force in Iran. You then have the pager bomb plot in Lebanon, the wiping out of not only the senior echelons of Hezbollah, but also Hassan Nasrallah. Then you have the bombings of Iran, the Iranians attacking Israel, the fall of the regime in Syria, which Netanyahu took credit for. And so basically what happened then, Ryan, last summer, was that Biden goes out in front of the world. He says, hey, we're on the brink of something here. The Israelis just shove it in his face, turn around, and then escalate the war even further. And Biden rewards them, not punishes them, rewards them by showering billions of dollars more in U.S. weapons on them, and then openly endorsing the Israelis setting fire to the Middle East. And basically, there's been no discussion of a ceasefire since then until Donald Trump. Trump then wins the election. And he starts saying things like there's going to be hell to pay if there's not a deal. Now, much of the reporting on that was, sort of spun as he's threatening Hamas.
And this is the key. I wanted you guys to hear kind of the quick overcap that Jeremy gives because I think it's important. But this point right here is why I'm playing this clip. Most of the media was saying that Trump saying there will be hell to pay was aimed at Hamas. And most of the media was responding, and a lot of Muslims who were trusting our media sources, where our first thought was like, how could it get any worse? Because how could it? I mean, of course, things could always get worse, but it just didn't seem likely. So I want you to hear what he has to say, and then we're going to move to a different clip.
That some unknown horror is going to befall Hamas. First of all, what worse could possibly happen to the Palestinian people of Gaza right now? I mean, this is a way of letting Joe Biden off the hook because this has been a scorched earth genocide. But if you really paid attention, what Trump was doing was saying not just to Hamas this needs to get done, but also to Israel. And by all accounts, what has occurred is that for his own reasons, Trump has made it very clear to the Israelis that a deal needs to be done in time for his inauguration.
Yeah, let's pause there because honestly, this is exactly right. Again, I am still skeptical. I think that, for instance, there's a lot of moving parts and Palestine is bigger than just Gaza. The whole Middle East is on fire. That's one of the reasons I wanted you to hear Jeremy's recap. But I really wanted us to focus on, number one, the legacy of genocide that's happened. And I'm going to show you a clip about that because in all honesty, Joe Biden has no right to act as arrogant as he did, walking away from the camera, asking like, is that a joke? Let's get into the other video I have for you that's going to really kind of show just from a Palestinian perspective, what Joe Biden's legacy should be, especially on this issue.
These are not my words, but the words of every single one here, standing here after 459 days of the most well-documented and first live-streamed genocide in history. For these days, we've been reporting tirelessly, extensively, and thoroughly on this genocide. It's indeed a genocide against us, which we've been documenting in makeshift tented camps and workplaces. They are really the places we've taken shelter since day one. You've seen us shedding tears over our loved ones, colleagues, friends, and family members. You've seen us killed in every possible way. We've been immolated, incinerated, dismembered, and disemboweled. And recently, we've been freezing to death. What more ways should you be seeing us killed in so that you can move and act and stop the hell inflicted upon us? There are no words to describe what we've been going through, because you've seen our bodies, how they've become fragile, skinny, and fatigued. But we never stopped. We never stopped to tell you the truth, to narrate our stories, and to tell you that we are being genocided, to move your dead consciences, to help a population that has seen every sort of torture and tasted every type of death. Today, we're all standing here after Israel's impunity against us. And we don't know how many journalists should be killed so you can really act and stop Israel's impunity against us. Our message is very clear. We are journalists, and we are Palestinian journalists. We have been let down by the international community, particularly the international media organizations. We haven't seen any sort of support, a single word of support. Even the press vests we're wearing right now mark us as a target. They do not protect us at all. But yes, because we are Palestinians, maybe if we were Ukrainians or of any other citizenship with blonde hair and blue eyes, the word would rage and rant for us. But because we are Palestinians, we have only one right, which is to die and be maimed. Finally, we are just documenting a genocide against us. It's enough after almost a year and a half. We want you to stand foot by foot with us, because we are like any other journalists, reporters and media workers all across the globe, no matter the origin, the color or the race. Journalism is not a crime. We are not a target.
So I think that this is, as the source of this video, at least how I found it, through Owen Jones, a UK journalist who has been documenting the genocide since day one, and who had the unique perspective to take Israeli leaders at their word when they said things like, we'll cut off fuel, food, water, that they will be treated like human animals, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That, he did a fantastic job chronicling all of this. But he pointed out that this particular speech is probably going to be historic, and I agree. And I wanted everyone on my channel to see it. Now, not only is it Genocide Joe, and that's going to be his legacy, but I wanted to give another video that shows quite clearly how even Israelis are saying that this could have been brought to an end a long time ago. So let's get to that video right now.
Any updates?
If we can come back to this deal again, some are saying that the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has been forced into this deal because of the incoming Trump presidency, that he wouldn't have agreed to it otherwise. What do you think about that?
I think Israeli government could do much more many months ago. You must remember we're dealing with monsters, and the negotiation is very hard, and I'm not sure something would have been agreed, but I'm sure that the Israel government could do more. And I hope now the condition, and it doesn't matter if it's inside the pressure or outside from Trump or whatever the reasons are, I'm happy that finally they managed to agree this. But like we said, it wasn't agreed yet by the Israeli government. So we're not there yet.
Yair Moses, the son of one of the hostages still being held in Gaza. Yair, thank you so much for your time, for speaking.
Yeah, so there you have it, guys. I think one of the things about this that is so heartbreaking is the fact that this could have happened a lot earlier. But just to kind of hammer down the point of why I'm still fraught with this deal, why I'm still scared, is this idea of West Bank annexation. So while I don't think it's quite time for me to eat crow, I do think to the Muslims who voted for Trump, I do owe you an apology. I think that you guys at least voted for change. I didn't see it at the time. And, even given the facts today, I probably still would have voted third party. because there's so much that I'm worried about. And in particular, in the first video I did on this channel talking about the election, I showed clips of Miriam Adelson, and I showed screenshots of the stories reporting her campaign donations and how sources have reported that they were in exchange for annexation of the West Bank. And on top of that, how, she acknowledges that in the past, her husband made campaign contributions for the recognition of Jerusalem and for the Golan Heights to be given to Israel. So I want us to remember the whole picture here. Yes, steps towards ending the killing, we have to celebrate that. We have to pray for the victims. But let's get into the idea of the West Bank and why we have to be cautious in our hope.
Next, the West Bank. Americans need to understand what this would mean for key U.S. partners like Jordan, as well as for U.S. interests in the Middle East. If Israel annexes the West Bank, this would be an existential threat for Jordan. This would also derail the U.S. position in the Middle East and would prevent the Trump administration from achieving the goals they've laid out in the region. For Trump to achieve these campaign promises, he has to rein in the Israelis, and he has to tell them that the annexation of the West Bank is a red line for the United States, for U.S. interests, because the alternative drags in the United States and throws the region even more into chaos. When Trump was elected, Israeli Finance Minister Smotrich told his staff to prepare for annexation and that he looked forward to working with the Trump administration on this. What's different is that you have U.S. politicians that are starting to signal the same thing. Senator Tom Cotton introducing legislation requiring the U.S. government to no longer use the words West Bank, but to refer to it as Judea and Samaria, the biblical name for it, which is what the Israeli government uses. At a campaign event, you had former President Bill Clinton also refer to the West Bank as Judea and Samaria.
They were there. In the time of King David, and the southernmost tribes had Judea and Samaria.
The selections Trump has made for his political appointments seem to indicate that he would support Israel's annexation of the West Bank, such as his choice of Mike Huckabee to be U.S. ambassador to Israel.
There is no such thing as a West Bank. It's Judea and Samaria. There's no such thing as a settlement. They're communities, they're neighborhoods, they're cities. There's no such thing as an occupation.
All of these are green lights for the Israeli extremists that are looking to annex the West Bank and drive the 3 million Palestinians that currently live there into Jordan or elsewhere. On my recent trip to Jordan, what I heard most often was this concern that Israel was about to annex the West Bank. What I heard in particular was not only is Israel working to prevent the creation of a state of Palestine, but it may have shifted its views of Jordan in that it is again viewing Jordan as an alternative homeland for the Palestinians. This was an issue that was supposed to have been resolved by the 1994 peace treaty. And for me, the main takeaway here is we know that Trump campaigned on the idea that he would be able to restore order to this part of the world. He also campaigned on the idea that he would be able to achieve what Biden couldn't and get the Saudis to normalize with Israel. Neither of these will be possible if Israel annexes the West Bank. In the current context, where Syria is on the verge of extreme instability with the fall of Assad, the region is just getting more and more chaotic. And so the idea that the US government would support that kingdom becoming destabilized is frankly somewhat insane.
That is a red line, because I think that is the plan by certain of the usual suspects to try and create de facto issues on the ground. No refugees in Jordan.
There would be two outcomes here. If you had up to 3 million Palestinians fleeing from the West Bank into Jordan, the king of Jordan would have two choices. He would either have to respond to the demands of his public to do something, which would mean abrogating the 1994 peace treaty signed with Israel, meaning attacking Israel, which would start a war, or he would resist those calls, which is more likely, and then face the possibility of being overthrown. You could then have militias or other groups operating in Jordan that would try to enact some kind of retribution against the state of Israel, similar to what precipitated the Israeli war against Hezbollah. Israel would respond with massive amounts of force against Jordan and lead to yet another front in this war. About half of Jordan's population are of Palestinian descent, which is part of why the issue of Palestine remains so salient for the Jordanian public. Jordan has had to absorb subsequent waves of refugees, often as a result of U.S. military actions in the region. So the U.S. invasion of Iraq in 2003 created a wave of Iraqi refugees.
Okay, so you see how this idea of annexation is a tremendously important thing. And also, does it actually lead to a lasting ceasefire? Are we able to trust that in the wheeling and dealing that, there wasn't a promise for, hey, stop the genocide in Gaza. And then as the public and, our attention turns to other things, we have to deal with issues in the West Bank. Not only that, but the problem is with the lasting ceasefire. I want you to hear from Anthony Blinken himself on if in any way they've been set up for peace after all of this murder, destruction, and bombing. So let's get back to some videos now that show him in his own words, admitting that all this was for nothing.
Avoid. Indeed, we assess that Hamas has recruited almost as many new militants as it has lost. That is a recipe for an enduring insurgency and perpetual war. The longer the war goes on, the worse the humanitarian situation gets in Gaza.
So as you can see right there, that he's basically setting the stage for the ceasefire to fail. He's planting the seed for us all to say, oh, Hamas has restocked its people and they're ready to attack again. And so, again, I want to be hopeful, but at the same time, I have a very hard time thinking about, is this something that is going to last? And I think that we have to focus on the future. We have to focus on getting them to a place of rebuilding and taking care of the children that are left in Palestine. Something that I saw looking up the details of this, and it was reported by Jeremy Scahill in that clip that I played later on from Breaking Points, that there's these strange calculations on how many hostages released from Gaza will calculate to how many Palestinians will be returned. I saw Britannica.com, a news site covering this, and they said basically that for every freed civilian Israeli hostage, that Israel will release 30 Palestinian, and it's reported there as prisoners, but I think they're hostages as well. It's 2025, and are we really at a place and a time where we're negotiating the value of lives? I mean, this could have been done at any point. There were so many times when all of the prisoners and hostages could be released for peace over and over and over again that I've clearly showed you in this video. And it makes, I can't help but think, because I'm a student of history, is this a 3/5 negotiation, a 3/5 resolution? Are we looking at lives like that in 2025, 1 to 30? I'm really curious as better numbers of the murdered come out and how many civilians are killed as time goes on, if this 1 to 30 calculation is going to be even that still an undercount. So all I can tell you is I really hope that number one, the ceasefire holds. Number two, that we can do something to support the survivors. Number three, that regardless of who gets credit for what, that all of us stay active in advocating for peace. And then as a final message, I have to just give a final shout out. I've done it in multiple videos to groups like Jewish Voice for Peace and Not in Our Name. I want every person that's a part of my community, meaning on YouTube, everyone watching this or anyone I reach on social media, to really continue to make a differentiation between the actions of the state of Israel and your Jewish neighbors here in America, to make a differentiation between the people who are Jewish and the religion of Judaism and Zionism weaponized to do the horrific things that your Shmochich, your Ben Gavirs, your Netanyahus, and so many in Israel we're cheerleading for. It's just undeniable. There's so much proof and evidence to the point where the IOF, Israeli occupation forces, had to actually tell their own soldiers, stop posting your war crimes, instead of telling them, stop committing war crimes. So the work ahead is going to probably be even harder than the work that people have done to raise awareness of the genocide. And we all have to continue to advocate as much as possible. Thank you for your time. God bless you all. May we be people of peace and people who bring about peace. God bless.